Now, one of the interesting problems with Arctic sovereignty is that mm, many species of different types and different varieties all use the Arctic on a kind of temporary basis. And just because there isn't permanent human uh, settlements there doesn't mean there isn't an already established way of life. And maybe that way of life is meant to be exclusive of humans. It's very interesting, but there's lots of new science coming out of it, and we still don't know the full implications of mad land grab in the Arctic, and especially not of commercial or economic exploitation. We're seeing some of the backlash of the exploitation of oil in the last few months because of the spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and the North Pole seems a little bit even more complex than the Gulf of Mexico, just as an ecological phenomenon. So I'm not sure it's in our best interest to be meddling with it, but nevertheless, here we are. And I just wanted to show this because it shows the the already wide diversity of life, and none of these creatures has an advocate. Even something like Greenpeace is only an observer on the United Nations. Nobody is going to advocate on behalf of the best use and ecological sustainability of this region. Um, at least if our track record from the last 10 years is in human civilization is any indication. So it's kind of sad that this entire system is suddenly up for grabs and is suddenly so threatened because with the technology nowadays and the ambition of some people, there's no telling what could happen. And it's all very sticky legal minutia that's involved with it. But it will be very interesting to see how it goes. Now it's interesting because on the one hand we say there's no native inhabitants, and on the other we say there's no one to advocate for the sort of natural environment there. And yet there are these native councils that exist, native bands and tribes who use the Arctic much like nature. They come up temporarily, they make the best use of whatever they can, and they leave again when the ice retreats. And lots of these people, this is their ancestral way of living. Is that they've done this for it's what they do, and it's very interesting because they are only represented by one sort of voice on the council, the Arctic Council, which has been formed for many years but is only having to do anything in the next couple. But they only have one seat, and only even I think were recently added from the information I've read, and so it's very much a slap in the face to Indigenous rights again, even today. And of course, no one's more outraged than them, and we're not on their side, so we don't really pay that much attention to it. But it's again a great travesty. The majority of Native input to the information I've seen so far is they want recognition of their claims on the region, and they just want to govern it autonomously, which is basically, they just want to leave it alone and be left alone. And you can be sure that the entire civilized contingent across all the different kind of political divides will be unanimous in their support of not recognizing native claims or giving them some sort of portioning of it. But the ultimate end will still be to exploit all the commercially viable resources that the region has. And I just wanted to make sure that I included this because it's a very important point in law that indigenous rights are seriously just under considered, and it's so strange. If someone was to come here and occupy us, if China was to invade Canada and occupy us and take everything we had and move us around and give us money as compensation and whatever, we would still consider it occupation. But when we think of our own country, with its 100-year history, you know, um, we don't see that at all. And it's kind of sad that Canada didn't take a very different position. When the events started to unfold in April and Russia sent troops to the Arctic to do some exploration, our Canadian defense and our Canadian Arctic ministers both just made very embarrassing and aggressive remarks back. And of course, no one has any claim over the Arctic right now. And American and Canadian government both were Americans were more quiet, but even ours was pretty quiet and just said, "Oh well, it's just Russia," just a stunt they're doing, and it's not a stunt. It's very interesting that Canada didn't take a position advocating Indigenous rights and advocating a sort of unilateral approach to this. Why not have the oil drilled out and have a portion of the money put into native funds or into funds for third world development or whatever? And instead, we just kind of made, subtle threats at Russia and carried on our merry way. And I think that honestly, the Russian landing was more to test our response and see where we would, which side we would be on, than it was to make any kind of claim. And it's just too bad that we missed that opportunity to really step up and take the reins and take a leadership position and advocate a unilateral international solution that would benefit all countries. Now, this is the image that I was talking about before, and I just wanted to close with it because, like I said, this is kind of the thing that scares me about it right now. Is these are the only things out there is military bases, and it's fine when everyone's all amicable and the world's sort of at peace. But this is in Alert, Canada, which is the farthest northern settlement that we have. As you can see, it's not very highly populated. The island of Svalbard and the city of Longyearbyen have far more residents. It's actually a nice little European city. It's very cute. But this is here. This is our contribution. It's maybe 100, 200 people or something, and they're right on the front lines of a new frontier. And I think it's exciting because I think if we did this right, the Arctic would never stop giving us secrets and benefits. But instead, we seem to want to compete and establish ourselves in a very macho and dominating sort of posture. And what's going to happen is in 2013, the United Nations panel will hear the conclusions of the Arctic Council and will then begin the process of deliberating and decision making about it. Well, if this little picture here is any indication, I hope it makes it that far. Russia is a very kind of sleepy giant for about 10 years now. Their economy is pretty well healed. They're a major exporter of petroleum, and they already have their whole country mapped out, sort of like we do in North America. And they tried to go into Afghanistan and take over countries and get more resources back in the day, and we shut them down. And now we seem to be at that kind of, we're in there trying to do it, and it's really taking a heavy toll on us. Our economies are in recession, and we're not doing that great. And this is a really big, and it is legally unclaimed. It's a vast unclaimed portion of the earth. And so the international framework about it isn't even fully intact. When they meet in 2013, I think it will be to establish that framework. And so I think what you're seeing is that the governments are all trying to establish what I believe is called pre-facte or pre-facie evidence, where um, for example, if Russia goes and puts little cities like this all over the Arctic and starts drilling oil or doing whatever and agrees, of course they're in a violation of something, but they'll pay the penalties later. You could see actual territorial aggression here. And the really scary thing is that with the rise of private security companies and the, the aggrandizement of corporate powers, there's little reason to doubt that a private corporate war could happen here, which is state sponsored. And that's a really big concern, and it's a huge legal concern.